The Mormon church has raised a bunch of sissies that can't take criticism. Um, that way you improve, because criticism helps you improve. Um, you know, now, if you wonder why some people get mad about things, well, watch all of this video, and at the end, you'll hear why, and you'll hear the soft-hearted reason why. But it's infuriating to hear people say things that, you try and talk to them with kindness, and as soon as you disagree with somebody in the Mormon church that hasn't learned to grow up yet, they start, oh no, we're being persecuted because somebody doesn't agree with us. That's what they've done. And they go into communities and force their way in, and if they can't get their way, then they cry persecution. Oh, we can't run the town over. So we're being persecuted. But crazy things that Mormons will say. I know this church is true, they say. I know the church is true. Okay, what part of the church is it that's true? Is it the corporate building? Because that's the church. What you're thinking about is your community and your friendships within that community, and you feel like that's true. Or maybe some of the good things that you can learn from some of the stories that you talk about. But you can learn good things from some stories. There's people supposed to say, I know that Harry Potter is true. Ask yourself, or what's a yad? Y-A-D. What's a yad? It's the start of the origination of it's the start of a magic wand. But they say that it had a different purpose, but that's what it was, the start of the magic wand. A yad. Y-A-D. So anyways, so is it when you say the church is true, is it the Book of Mormon being the principal ancestors of the American Indians? Oh, no. Now pretty much everybody has seen the studies. The DNA is like, oh no, they're from Asia. So that's not, principal ancestors. That's not true. Matter of fact, they had to change that in the new version of the Book of Mormon, because in the newest version, I should say, of the Book of Mormon. So that wasn't true. What about the church having all unpaid clergy? Well, that's not true. Leaders of the church get six-figure, they call it a stipend, but it's a six-figure cash windfall. And if you become one of the 12, you get like $1 million right off the bat to pay off all your debt and stuff like that. And you can say, oh, well, they're giving up their life. Okay, so that's true. But they kept saying that, oh, it's just unpaid clergy. We're just an unpaid clergy church. And it's on the website today that the church has unpaid clergy. It doesn't distinguish between local leadership and the leadership of the actual church. The corporation is what we should call it, though, because that's what it is. And do you know that the word corporation comes from the word corpse, and that's from the word from a dead body. Corporation is a dead body or a dead animal. So how about that? And it's incorporated into and under the laws of the state. God has positioned his church under and incorporated into the laws of the state. And who's the state? Well, it's the Roman government, just moved to locations. In fact, the church administrative building is a Roman building. Look at it. It's a Roman building. And they call it the CAB. CAB, the Church Administrative Building, CAB. Well, what's a cab? It's a taxi. And a taxi is what? A tax. See? And they're taxing you 10%. They call it tithing because they have you put on a tie and become a stiff neck, right? You become one of them stiff-necked deceivers. And so the church is getting billions, hundreds and billions of dollars. It's become a one of those, people talk about, these huge money grubbing corporations. Well, that's what the church is. It's a huge money grubbing corporation that owns a bunch of money grubbing corporations, and keeps stores up riches. So the unpaid clergy, that's not true. They're getting six figures. So that was a lie. What about the new and everlasting covenant of forced and coerced polygamy? Was that true? Oh, no, that wasn't true. In fact, now they say you shouldn't have done that. What about racism? Was that true? Oh, no. Now they disavow all that. So all those prophets who supposedly had a direct link to God, they didn't, because I never talked to not one of them. But they all say that, oh, we don't know why, but we just keep doing it, da da da. They didn't have the discernment enough to say, oh, it was wrong to be racist. So is it racism? Was that true? No, that wasn't true. What about the book of Abraham? The book of Abraham, they said, was written by his own hand. Was that true? No, the church essays will now admit to you on the church website that actually that papyri was just funerary text, like stuff from Book of the Dead and whatnot. Well, that's fitting for the church, though, because they love dead stuff. They like to do works for the dead. They like to say temple dedication. Oh God, hear the words of our mouths. Well, you just said dead. You might use a magic spell, D-E-D, but what the words of your mouths, what you're speaking is death, D-E-A-D, dedication. And so and then you say temple is another word for body. So you say temple dedication, which is enunciating a dead body. And that sometimes they'll say that the temple is a representation of Christ on earth, that they're enunciating dead, and then they have laws and ordinances. Now the law is condemnation. That's why it's called condemnation, right? Adam's nation, Adam's nation, a damnation. People living in damnation of condemnation of laws and ordinances. Now, the law of, like the law of Moses or the law of Abraham or the law of government or whatever. Law of is an anagram for a wolf. And a wolf is an anagram of follow. So what they want you to do is follow the law of a wolf. What wolf? The wolves in sheep's clothing. The ones in wool suits and stiff-neck ties. And and why they love them ties? They're necromancers. They love death, right? And what were you told? Those who shun me, they love death. And so they put them ties on because they're necromancers. They love that stuff around the neck, And so, like a noose, that's what a tie is a representation of anyways, is a noose. But they wear business suits to church. Business suits. And that's what suits are. They're business suits. And so they wear those things to church because it's about business. In fact, they say it in the beginning. We're going to start with some church business. Church business. The big corporation. So what about the book of Abraham written by his own hand? It wasn't. It's just standard funerary text, Book of the Dead stuff. What about all those pictures? Were those true? The ones, like Joseph Smith sitting there reading the gold plates with his spectacles and the Urim and Thummim? Oh, nope. Now they say that's not true. Well, there's another thing. There's another lie. They say, and they keep publishing the lie. They keep, I think in most chapels now, even they got the same pictures on the wall. Joseph reading the gold plates, but that's not actually what they say happened. Of course, none of it actually happened. But now they say, oh, it was a rock and a hat. If you want a rock and a hat, it's a stone and a hat. It's because my mom's last name is Stone. Um, so if you want true revelation, um, you know where to look. But and so what he do? He was putting his face in a hat and blocking out all the light. And what it was doing was blocking out the light of the world. You know, instead of looking for the light, it was blocking out the light. And then um, so all that wasn't true. So much for all those pictures that you had when you're, kid growing up, and the ones that they use in the church um, media library now, and all that kind of stuff. So that wasn't true. Um, what about the ritual started with Jesus Barabbas that's been accredited to Jesus of Nazareth? But if anybody thought with a brain for just a few moments, and really started to think about, hey, what are we doing going to church on Sundays and pretending to eat the Savior instead of save the Savior? Eat in remembrance of the body, drink in remembrance of the blood. That's a vampire ritual. That's a vampire ritual of people that have been parched from the words of parchment skin. And so every Sunday, because they're so thirsty, because they haven't been quenched yet with the truth, every Sunday they have to go to church and, give me something to drink. Give me something to drink. Let me pretend eating the Savior and drinking his blood. Of course, they do it with a prisoner's meal, bread and water. Why? Because they're mental prisoners, And so, did Jesus start that? Jesus of Nazareth? No, he didn't. Jesus Barabbas did. But nobody had any discernment to even think about that for a moment. Vampire ritual, eat the Savior instead of save the Savior. What about the first vision? Now, they told us one version of the first vision, but the only one that was written by Joseph was a different version, and the other ones that he talked about were completely different. Some of them were one person that he saw, some of them were two people, some of it was angels, but it's a different story every time. Now, how do you get that wrong? How do you change that every time? Oh, well, he was speaking to different people. He was talking about a supposed miraculous event, and that's what they say, right? A marvelous work and a wonder. Hey, wait a minute. Didn't somebody say marvel not? So, so is any of those visions of, oh, and here's another thing. The word vision. Have you ever noticed when people use the word vision in religion, it actually refers to a dream-like event? In fact, if you go to the church's what is it, dictionary glossary thing, and look up the word vision, everything that it's listed with is a dream, and all dreams, and Joseph's also dream, vision, just a dream. I got a dream for a big corporation, So, which version of the thing was? Well, it's all a lie. So that wasn't true. Okay. So what about this? This one, I really get upset about this one. What about paying 10% cost for worthiness? The financial cost of exaltation. The Lord's business cost for the gift of living. Should be the gift of living. Living should be a gift, but they've made it into a cost, a fee. You're being accosted by the church. You're being attacked by the church. Attacks. They're saying, attacks, attacks. Like you're being attacked. And so the church attacks you 10%. And then they hoard up the riches. They hoard it up. And so guess what God gets to think about in the evenings? He gets to think about children that are starving, that people that are homeless, about how the world has made it the cost of living instead of the gift of living. And because the church won't use its resources to save people from suffering, God gets to think about that every night. Though I can promise you, I don't try and think about it every night, because otherwise I'd have lost my mind a long time ago. and the church will say, oh, well, it's not about the money. If it's not about the money, let's do something. Let's try this. For the next um, indefinite period, instead of giving the church 10% of your money, why don't you give it to um, uh, children's charities, or for building wells in Africa, or for housing the homeless, and just take in and say, hey, look, this is what we gave our money to. You say it's not about the money. The church says it's not about the money. So here's what we gave our tithing to, and see if it's about the money. Because I promise you, it'll suddenly be about the money. Um, and a lot of people have been told that they can just write a check for back um, for back tithing, and they can get a temple recommend, or they will have to wait and pay for 6 months. So if it's not about the money, how come they have to keep paying? Um, so is the cost of living true, or is the gift of living true? Because really, I kind of think it's the gift of living. Um, and it's supposed to be the gift of living. Just nobody happens to be, not very many people happen to be living that. But that's why I'm out here now, and that's why I'm not taking money now. You know, I'm not working for money. I'm not taking money, and I'm not paying people. I'm not asking people to pay me to be kind to them, to work for them, doing different things, and I'm not paying other people to be kind to me, so that I can eat and have food and a place to live and stuff like that. I'll just stay out here and die. You know, at some time God's got to take a moral stand, and so that's what I'm doing right now. Probably shouldn't have said that because but anyways. So what is it? What is it about? Then they hide the money under shell corporations. So that wasn't true, because that's a lie. But then they lied and they put it off, and they said, well, we were relying on the advice of our attorneys. Well, I thought you were relying on the revelations of God, but apparently you lack such discernment. You decide, nah, forget that. We just want to listen to attorneys. In fact, that's how the church is run, by attorneys and doctors. You know, people that are represented by the caduceus, the serpent. You know, not that all doctors are bad, but certainly if they're trying to, well, I'm not gonna. That's a whole nother video. So when you say the church is true, what part of the church is true? Because most every part of the church that you say is true, the church is actually refuted. Right? So what is it that you know is true? I will tell you the one true thing about the church, that it builds good community. That's it. But how true is that community? Because if you decide that you don't want to be a paying member of the corporation anymore, that community will suddenly forget you even exist. So maybe people could grow up and actually learn to accept criticism and understand when people leave a corporate organization because they just can't stand the greed and the lies anymore, that's the reason. And the church refutes itself all the time, constantly. So what about people that made mistakes in their life and then they're brought before Pilate, instead of being treated as a savior would treat them, and say, you know, who among you is without sin? You know, that's not how the church works. They have something called disciplinary councils. In other words, they become the Jewish priest and high priest dragging somebody before the Savior. Except they don't drag them before the Savior. They drag them before each other and condemn them. Right? Because if you bring them to the Savior, then I'll tell you, what are you doing? Why are you trying to hurt your own family? Why are you trying to punish your own family? You know? So the very first disciplinary council was those high priests, and and that's who's in the disciplinary councils today. High priest, but the very first one was high priest bringing a woman before the Savior and saying, condemn her, and she wasn't condemned. She wasn't given any conditions. She wasn't. What she was treated with kindness and respect, because condemnation doesn't fix anything. But that's what disciplinary councils are, condemnation. That's why they're called disciplinary. They're there to condemn people, you know. So what about the church is it that's true? What about the corporation is so holy and sacred? Or is it just a bunch of lawyers and doctors represented by serpents? You can learn good stories and values in lots of different things. That doesn't mean that that particular place or organization or whatever is the one true organization or place. In fact, people will say this a bunch in church too: by your fruits you shall know them. And they'll use that to either condemn other organizations or to try and say that the church is so great. Well, really? So here's some of the fruits of the church. And the fruits of the church prove the church false. Shell corporations, lying and deceit, secret combinations, disciplinary councils and excommunication. One version of a translation story changed to another version. Revelations that weren't actually revelations, first rejected and denied and then published as something that actually happened. Eating the Savior instead of save the Savior. Hoarding and storing up worldly riches. Mormon influencer child abusers. The false god Thor with their brain manipulation, power, authority, and the abolishment of equality, the quality of love, a family quality, in favor of authority and subordinate. The absolute destruction of equality, the quality of love. And then forced and coerced polygamy. The world's largest cattle sacrifice ranch, the most productive ranch in the world, providing death sacrifices to corporations to sell you a diet of death. That's why a diet is called a diet. It starts with the word D-I-E, die, a diet. See that cow over there? Go kill it, go dye it, and then we'll eat it. Because the fruits and vegetables that we were given isn't the death that we desire. We don't want fruit that was made, vegetables that were made with abundance. You eat one, tomato or apple or banana, and there's seeds enough to make dozens, hundreds of thousands. No, we want to kill something. We want to do that. We want to take a life and another being and sacrifice it, throw it on a sacrificial altar that represents a volcano, even barbecue grills, but even the altars of Abraham and Moses and all those guys, little replica miniature volcano altars to represent volcano. Because if they didn't live near a volcano, they just built a little one. They set it on fire and sacrificed to it, just like they would do with the volcanoes. Throw somebody or throw some animal into a volcano to appease the volcano god. And so that's what they teach kids in Sunday school, that God is a God of animal and human sacrifice. That's another fruit of the church. All those things, dividing families and saying, oh, you're not a paying member of the corporation, you're rejected from attending this family wedding. We're all about families, but we don't let any family visit. You can't come to the wedding. Sorry. You just have to wait for the reception or the ring ceremony. But you can't be at the actual event of people joining together. You can't do that because that would be too family friendly. because that's one of the fruits of the church. Um, so those are the corrupt and evil fruits of the church. And what do we know about corrupt fruit? So, um, if you say, I know the church is true, what of it is true? What about the church is actually true? So, why am I so upset? Because those are upsetting things, right? Those are things that are all non moral things. They're evil and wicked, and it makes me upset about it, right? And I've pleaded with people, please don't pretend to eat somebody's body and drink their blood. And I've tried to say it in as many different nice ways as possible. And when you realize that people just aren't going to listen, then you just have to say it, right? You just have to say it. And so that's what I'm saying to you, is that I'm pleading with you because I love you, right? I'm saying don't make life the experience of living be the cost of living. Make it the gift of living. And don't teach each other this lie that it's supposed to be heaven is an experience for the dead. Why are you so uh, damn fascinated and fixated on death in every way? Work for the dead and money that's based on dead people. The Bureau of Engraving. What's a grave? It's a grave is where dead people are, and those are dead people on the money, and they come from the Bureau of Engraving. So the money is, and the law was based from Moses, 2 stone tablets, the shape of tombstones, because the law is condemnation, the law is death. And so, and if you tried to sit, everything is a temple dedication and works for the dead. And what is it that is not about death that has to do with your church? Nothing. It's all based on death. Governments and religions are all based on death. And I'm saying that heaven is supposed to be an experience for the living. Don't be so fixated with death. Death happens, okay? But then you come back again. So Nicodemus was told, hey, people are going to be born again. That's what happens. You got to be born again if you want to see heaven, because people haven't made heaven yet. And so you have to make heaven, and then when you're born again, you get to be born into heaven. You get to come, when you die, you go to heaven, because that's where you're born right back to. I know people say they've taken the born again and they say, oh, it's a figure of speech. The fig tree was cursed. It's not a figure of speech. That's what happens. You're born again. Nicodemus wasn't okay. People have to be born again. And Nicodemus says, what, am I supposed to enter again into my mother's womb? Nobody said, no, it's a figure of speech. No, they said, marvel not. Because it's not a figure of speech. Don't marvel that you're going to be. You think that you deserve heaven if you can't even make it together as a human family? You think you deserve to be a God when you can't even make heaven together as a human family? If you can't do it here where you're born, if you can't act right here, what makes you think that suddenly you're going to just change and not have a celestial economy where people have to pay for the gift of living? You got to learn how to make heaven now. And heaven is when you make life the gift of living instead of the cost of living. Or, do you create a family so that their life is a test? Because that's what you teach at church, that this life is supposed to be a test. Really? Is that why you create families? Is that you're so narcissistic that you don't just create people because you love them? You don't create a family because you love them and you feel there's something good about you that should keep going into the eternities? No, what you think is that living shouldn't be a gift, that it should be a test, that there should be a cost of living, that it shouldn't be a gift. You should have to earn to be able to live. No, you were given no. You can't choose to be created because you didn't exist yet. That means your creator has to make your experience a gift, because you couldn't ask for or reject it. So it has to be a gift to you. So Please, don't be so fixated with death. Enjoy the experience of living. It's supposed to be fun. You've made it a competition with each other. Everybody trying to get ahead of everybody, stay ahead of the bills, stay ahead of the competition, da da da. Instead of and so that you have winners and losers in the human race. But if you were to act like a human family, everybody would win. So stop saying you know the church is true, because you know it's not. What you know is true is that you love the people that you see on Sundays, or at least you shallow love them. Um, and those people that have left the church, you should reach out to them and tell them you're sorry for not being their steady friend, for just disappearing on them and having nothing to do with their lives anymore. That's terrible.